Welcome to Order Militarist Radio TV. And today's topic, what is real Christian leadership? And we welcome again Brother Alexis Bonello to the show.
Thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's always great to be on Order Militarist Radio TV, breaking new ground in independent Catholic media in the English-speaking world and advancing the cause of the order and the defense of Christians persecuted everywhere.
Well, today's topic, what is real Christian leadership? What are some good examples?
Okay, so first I want to welcome all the new viewers from Twitter. We've revived our Twitter accounts, Militaris Cath and Ordo Militaris, and we've activated our one even for Italians who'd like to join. So if you're listening, I thank you for coming by. So here on Ordo Militaris Radio TV, we do programs to educate, inform, and raise awareness, and on topics that normally no one is speaking about, and we give you the truth bluntly and directly and without any political correctness, because we have our own radio TV platform run by AJ Bauman, who is the director of the station, and physical descendant of Charlemagne. So people ask us, do we have any nobility behind our organization? We are not an order of noblemen. We're not a noble order where people pay a fee to get a badge and wear a cape and walk in parades. We're about defending Christians. We do have pledges, and we do give honorary titles to our members according to how much they're pledging, but it's to defend Christians. It's not to, pretend. So real Christian leadership touches upon this, because what it means to be a Christian leader is not to wear the insignia of a leader. It's not to walk at the head of a parade. Okay. It is not to have bragging rights in the coffee niche of your office. It is not to be able to put letters after your name or wear special garments in church. That's not Christian leadership. Christian leadership is a particular and rather rare quality of the Catholic man or Christian man who realizes that his first duty is to Jesus Christ. That Jesus Christ is not only his Savior, his Lord, his Master, his teacher, his exemplar, his strength, his counselor, his help, and his salvation, but is his King. And he is pledged to serve him. So Christian leadership is almost non-existent now, because people are raised in a completely secular mindset, thinking that religion has nothing to do with the real world, okay? Or that all loyalty belongs to unbelievers, or that we should submit to unbelievers or to a godless, Masonic, atheistic, secularist order or political order, or that even politics itself should be divorced from religion and from Jesus Christ. And all those are false post-French Revolutionary or Masonic ideas. Christians have always believed that when Christ ascended into heaven and said, "All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me," the actual Greek says, "All authority in heaven and earth has been given to me." Modern translations hide that because they don't want you to even think that Christ has authority over the state or over your town or over your country. Christians have always believed that Christ does. Christ has all authority over your country, your army, your navy, your air force, your town, your state, your mayor, your governor, and your president or your prime minister, your senate, your house, or your parliament, or your camera, whatever form of government you have. He has all authority. It all belongs to him, and therefore it all must be rendered to him. So a Christian leader is a unique and rare creature today, and he is a man who recognizes that his duty is to serve Christ in whatever walk of life he has, and to do so in such a way as to lead others in the cause of Christ. So that is what Christian leadership is, and that's what we'll be talking about today.
So, how is the leadership, true Christian leadership, of Saint King Louis IX?
So probably one of the greatest examples in the history of Christianity of a Christian leader is the only French king ever to be canonized in the Catholic Church as a saint, and that's Louis IX. He was a Capetian. He lived in the 13th century, and he was a devout Catholic. When he ascended the throne after his minority ended, he didn't take the throne of France for himself. He took it for Jesus Christ. And he was not just a king, he was a Catholic king. In his entire spirit, his entire vision for life, in every way he acted and lived, he is the patron of all Catholic leaders. He is the patron of all Catholic kings. When it came to questions of morality, he was concerned about everything. For example, France in his day had lots of pedophilia and rape of children, and it also had prostitution. And his ministry said, well, let's get rid of both, we'll outlaw both. And he said, and his decision was rather remarkable and insightful. He says, let's not outlaw prostitution, but let's make sure that they have to stay in a state-approved house and clean and wash themselves. Because if we outlaw prostitution, then sexual perverts will rape children or rape innocents because they're wild. Okay. So we'll tolerate one to protect the innocent. And that was the kind of a king he was. He had a prudence that went right to the problem and could see how to solve many problems all at once, and yet with a certain kind of restraint. He was not a Puritan, okay? But when it came to the cause of Christ and the defending of persecuted Christians overseas, and especially the threat of Islam, he was a man who realized that as a king in the service of Jesus Christ, he owed the entire loyalty of himself and his kingdom to the cause of Christ. So when he decided to lead the Seventh Crusade, he didn't just get on his horse and go out. He spent 4 years planning, raising the funds, raising the military equipment, raising the military units, organizing his entire kingdom. The Seventh Crusade is perhaps the first organized modern war, because he used all the principles he did to prepare for that war was what we find in modern nation states: budgeting, expensing. He in that one war, he spent 7 years of the revenue of the Kingdom of France. So he was giving up all his money. 7 years of it took the kingdom. He spent the 4 years before he left, and it took the kingdom 3 more years to pay back the debts he accrued while he was on his way. And why did he lead this crusade? Okay, because the Shia government in Egypt was threatening the Holy Land, and since they had a superior military power, they could easily conquer it. The Crusaders had already defeated the local Muslims in the area of the Near East and signed a treaty with them for like 15, 20 years. They couldn't renew the war. But the Christians had signed no treaty with the Sultan of Egypt, so they could wage war against the Sultan. So the Christian leaders of the world decided, well, if we can reduce the military power of the Sultan or get him to sign a peace treaty with us, then we can ensure the Holy Land will be safe for a long time. So that's what he was doing. He was fighting a war of a preventative war. Okay, Egypt was not at war with the Crusaders or France, but St. Louis declared war on them to subdue them to the cause of Christ. So he understood the superiority of the Catholic religion, the duty of the Catholic religion, the right we have to make Islamic nations submit to a rule of peace and a law of peace, because they're not really the religion of peace. And he encouraged all the nobility and merchants and clergy of France to get behind him. He was so pure in his intentions, so upright. He had so much foresight that they all just thought that this was the greatest thing. And not all of the other nobles were as honorable or upright. So, and his campaign was, he understood that not everyone could afford going on the crusade. He paid wages to all his men. It was like one of the first modern kind of things. Everyone was paid from his royal treasury. So, and he not only went on the Seventh Crusade, he organized and led the Ninth Crusade, which was to Tunisia to suppress Islamic piracy in the Western Mediterranean, which was hurting French shipping and French merchants and involved in kidnapping tens of thousands of Christians and sending them into slavery. And he died there in Tunisia of dysentery on the Ninth Crusade. So an exceptional man, an exceptional king, an exceptional Catholic, and a most exceptional leader.
Now the man you is our photo for today's show, his tomb. I finally found his tomb. King Richard the Lionheart. How was his leadership?
King Richard I, or Richard the Lionheart, arguably the greatest of all the Plantagenet kings of England. He had three brothers, I think. His eldest brother died minority, and he ascends to the throne. His infamous co-brother, King John, as was his viceroy or regent in England while he was away. But John was not as evil as he's made to appear in the modern stories of Robin Hood. Okay. King Richard, when it came time for when the Third Crusade was called by the Holy Father, by the Pope in Rome, he showed excellent leadership. He was involved in a long struggle with the King of France because, as a member of the House of Plantagenet, they were suzerains of France and owned vast holdings in France. He owned like a third of France, in addition to all of England. He negotiated with the peace of the King of France, and the terms of the peace is that they would both go on the crusade. Okay, and that's unheard of, that two warring Catholic kings should decide to make peace and go on a crusade. That is probably one of the most unique events in Catholic diplomacy ever in the history of the church. And he was the one behind it because he wanted to go, and the French king said, well, if you go, I'm going to take advantage of you in France because you won't be there to defend your kingdom. He said, well, that's not fair. If I go on a crusade, you have to not attack my lands. That's what the Pope says. Well, the French king was going to like, well, what am I going to do all this time? And so he was invited by King Richard to go along and seek true glory in the service of Christ. He led his men across the Channel. They marched all their way there to the Holy Land, to the coast. He marched through Burgundy, down into Italy, boarded, I think, ships at Genoa. His army arrived and spent the winter at Messina, which is my mother's family's hometown. And there you see the famous scene where they didn't have any food for his men. So this is another excellent example. He had not yet married. He needed food for his men. And one of the princes of Toulouse said, well, I have a daughter. If you marry her, I'll supply you in Messina with all the food you want. And he agreed to the betrothal. That wasn't yet marriage. So he got food for his men, and the spring passed. Come spring, his family negotiated him a far better marriage of someone else. So he broke off the betrothal with the daughter of the Prince of Toulouse, or of Narbonne. And that prince got mad. So he already had troops there in Sicily. So a little war broke out at Messina, and Richard the Lionheart and fought it out over Messina, but they settled their scores and decided to go on the crusade. So he heads out from Messina, and he arrives in the Holy Land. The Third Crusade had like 11 kings present in it, or high nobles. It was one of the most highly represented by the Catholic aristocracy of Europe and the nobility. But immediately there broke out dissension about who would be the leader, because there was King Richard, who was the best military leader. There was the King of France, who argued seniority. There was also, I think, the Duke of Austria has represented the Holy Roman Emperor, who claimed to have higher dignity. They couldn't work it out. Okay, so here we see the leadership of King Richard shows itself. He could have made compromises and allowed the King of France to be the main leader of the whole army, and then they'd have their whole force working as one. But the King of France was a military idiot. He was he would have lost the battle even with superior forces, because who were they fighting but the famous Saladin, probably one of the greatest military leaders ever to rise in medieval times, or even in modern times, in the Islamic world. And Saladin was a Shia Muslim, very learned, and rather broad-minded. He wasn't a fanatic kind of Muslims as you see among groups like ISIS. Okay, so Richard the Lionheart had a good intelligence network. He knew that he was going to have to succeed in this conquest to retake Jerusalem, because the Third Crusade was out to retake it. It had been conquered by Saladin. They would have to have a good command structure, a very prudent tactics, and a tight control of the men, and therefore he was the only one that could do that, the other leaders. So the prudent leaders all wanted him to be the leader. The ones that wanted to play politics and diplomacy wanted the French king or the Austrian duke to be the leader, and he wouldn't put up with it. He understood that leadership was essential in this affair, and he wasn't going to bend. So that caused a dissension in the ranks. The Austrians get upset. The French also get upset. I think the King of France goes home, and they lose the French contingent, which was rather large. I think about 40% of their force. So now he's left with less troops. What's he going to do? He puts all his men in tight order. He puts them in a column. They march down the coastline of Palestine on their way towards Jerusalem. And he puts his best troops, the Knights Templar, on his flank that's exposed to the Muslims, knowing they're most in control. And he told them, no matter what you do, do not engage the enemy, okay? Because they don't have the strength to attack you. You're superior, heavily armored cavalry. Since you're fully armored, they're just going to bounce off. But if you go after them and break order, they'll be able to pick you off. So they proceeded on their way, and after a couple days, one of the contingents of the knights, just their zeal couldn't have it any longer. These Saladin's forces were heckling them, and they were going to give them a good dose of Christian sword. And so they broke ranks and started to charge the Muslim positions of Saladin, which is just what Saladin wanted. The Templar leader saw that since some of his men had already charged, he better order them all to charge, or the few that did charge would be massacred. At that point, we see Richard the Lionheart's brilliance as a leader. He wanted that men not fight. He could have insisted in his own little selfish will to let these guys go at it and they'd all be slaughtered. But that would have meant he would have had a force that wouldn't be able to do anything. So he made a very quick decision, and he said, well, the battle's begun, let us engage. And he ordered the entire Christian army to charge the enemy inland. And they, for a very bitter battle, I think it was several days long, against Saladin. Saladin's army nearly broke. There was heavy losses on both sides, and they ended the battle, I think, with a parley, or maybe it was Richard who won. So Richard and Saladin enter into diplomatic negotiations. And Saladin said, well, you know, you've come back. What are you here for? Because Saladin didn't want to lose honor. He had promised the Islamic world that Christians would not retake Jerusalem. Richard had promised the Christian world that he would retake Jerusalem. So in the diplomacy negotiation, Saladin, a very intelligent man, and he's to be praised for this, said, well, why do you want to take Jerusalem? And Richard the Lionheart, like a good Catholic, said, we we don't really want to conquer the city. We want the right to worship at the holy places and to use the churches as Christian churches and not be molested by the Muslim population. Well, then Saladin said, well, if all that's you want, I can grant you that and keep the city under my control, and that way we can both claim victory. And that was the deal they worked out. And that treaty between Saladin and Richard I was respected in the Islamic world all the way up into modern times. Catholics from then on and all Christians thereafter have had the right to pilgrimage to Jerusalem because of that treaty between Richard I and Saladin. Saladin's reputation was such that they respected that treaty. And if you go to the Holy Sepulchre today, in fact, you will find Muslims in charge of the church. They open it in the morning, they lock it in the evening, in accord with that treaty. So he showed excellent self-control, prudence, foresight, humility, decisiveness, and intelligence on understanding that you can win a war not only by force of arms, also by treaty. So King Richard the Lionheart, one of the greatest English kings. Not anything like the fake monarchs that have ruled England since the fall of the House of Tudor. Not anything like them at all. Excepting the Stuart. I will accept the Stuart because he's a descendant of Mary Queen of Scots.
How different is the leadership of the medieval Catholic monarchs compared to the leadership we see today?
This is a light year difference. We're not talking about quality difference here. We're calling about species difference. It's a totally different life form. The modern leader in the post-French revolutionary Masonic state in the West is not a Christian leader. Even if he be a Christian, he can't be a Christian leader because all the Masons would immediately start saying, you're mixing religion with politics, which is with their game, okay? And this goes back to the fact that Christians have been brainwashed into thinking that Christ has all power, but not all authority. There's no leader after the French Revolution, not even in the church, I would say, that has a concept of Christian leadership. They've all given it up. And so that they're not loyal to Christ, and they've let Christianity disintegrate around the world because they don't see themselves as obliged to serve Christ in everything. So the modern leader is worse than a mercenary. He confines his leadership to a false dichotomy where he owes Christ worship in church, but as a politician, he serves the Masonic order or the Satanic order. And that's not leadership, that's treachery, okay? They may not realize it because they're so brainwashed and so culturally and ideologically disoriented, they think they're being good Christian leaders. And you have masses of Christians on both sides of the Atlantic that praise these people as great Christian leaders. They're not anything of the like. They were a great Christian leader. They would suppress the Masonic Lodge, they would rewrite their constitution and make it a Catholic constitution, and it would say right at the beginning, Christ is our king and our nation exists to serve him, okay? Then they would be a good Christian leader. So these men are not Christian leaders, and there's no comparison. We could name all the other things. The Christian leader, for example, Louis IX. We talk about free speech today and things like, the Muslims have blasphemy laws. The Muslims' blasphemy laws are abhorrent because Islam's a false religion. But Christianity once had blasphemy laws, and they're very holy. And Louis IX said, if anyone blasphemed in my presence, before I would respond to him by pulling a sword out of its sheath and running it right into his guts. Because blasphemy is a horrible crime, and it's a horrible offense of God. And anyone who would blaspheme God, Louis IX pretends had no right to live. And as king, he had the right to impose capital punishment, so that is his decision. And modern liberals would be absolutely shocked by that because they want a nation in which they can blaspheme God, okay? And because they're absolutely wicked people, okay? So that shows you how different the world is and what Christian leadership is. Christian faith doesn't require that we kill people that blaspheme. Let me clarify that. But if as a Catholic king and as a Catholic nation, he certainly has that right to make that decision, because we must serve Christ first, and people need to fear offending God. Okay, the state, if a Catholic state existed for anything, it would teach people that there is a true God, and they should at least fear to offend him. Okay, because there's absolutely no reason, rational or otherwise, to blaspheme God. If you just want to do it because you want to prove that you have the right to do something, then you're a terrorist. Okay, even though the modern terminology of terrorism wouldn't include that.
What are the qualities of a Christian leader?
The qualities of a Christian leader. Okay, the first quality of a Christian leader is that he's intelligent. He can see that there's a problem when there's a problem. He doesn't let his mind be controlled by the narrative or the spiel, the propaganda, anyone else. He looks at reality and he sees it for what it is. Okay, so he's intelligent. He recognizes reality because why? He's committed and loyal to Christ, who is the truth. So for him, the truth is the first principle of any thought or action. Second of all, he has foresight. He is a man who can see ahead of the problem and how to solve it. Okay, what's coming down the road and what needs to be done. He can see the effects of a small problem growing into a big one. He's prudent. He knows the means, and he has the desire to solve the problem with the necessary tools, and not with vain slogans or false compromises, especially in morals or ideology. And he's a man of action. Okay, so he's not going to be someone who's worried what other people think of him. He is intent on convincing others to do the right, just, and holy thing, and encouraging them to do that. And he doesn't waste his time negotiating with people who want him to come down to their level. He's there to encourage people to come up to his. And he is one that he keeps a firm grasp on the situation. Okay, he doesn't allow any dissension, treachery, or if there's anyone in his government administration who's dishonest or treacherous, he doesn't let them sit around, and he doesn't let them exist. He immediately punishes and gets rid of them to show everyone that they must show loyalty to honesty, truth, and justice. And if they're not, they're pieces of scum and they don't deserve to be in a national government. He's resolute. Once he makes up his mind that solve that problem, he's going to do it. He's not going to let any amount of screaming, whining from the enemies of righteousness, truth, or virtue sway him. He also goes after the root of the problem. He's not going to sit around and dally with fighting them in the press. He's going to go right after the corrupt criminal organizations and root them right out. He is not a pansy who thinks that, well, we shouldn't use capital punishment. He knows that capital punishment is a necessary tool to cleanse the state permanently of criminality. And he rewards those who are honest and just. He promotes those who have the talent and capacity. And he remembers those who are honest and upright. And he's there for the innocent, the poor, and the common good of his whole people. And he is not spiteful, not vengeful, not vindictive, not vain. These are the qualities of a Christian leader.
You learned a lot that time in Dallas at the NRA convention, and how people only cared about things going on locally or here in America. We see a lot with the Catholic talking heads here too. Although if it affects them locally or here in America, they focus a lot of time on it. But if it is about protecting Christians in Africa or the Middle East, the whole time of day is given on these topics, or even to us. Why is that?
Okay, so it's going to seem pretty radical what I'm going to say, but let me explain it because it needs to be said. This is because we live in a Masonic society, And in a Masonic system of religion, the honor and duty, service, and loyalty we owe to God is transferred to the Masonic Lodge. Okay, this causes a short-circuiting in culture and in psychology, so that people's natural desire to do what's honest, just, heroic, valorous, it has no way of expressing itself in an honest, authentic way, because one is no longer serving God or a Christian king. So in place of it, the Masonic, in Masonic societies, just like in the United States, they promote false honor, false virtue, false courage, false valor, as a way of getting people thinking they're practicing the true virtues and distracted from practicing the true ones. So the NRA is completely Masonic in the way it's organized, because it presents itself as being there to defend your right to own guns. But there's why do you own a right to own guns? For what purpose do you own guns? It's not your self-protection. It is to uphold order and justice, and as a Christian, it's to uphold the reign of Christ in this world. But the NRA turns it all around and wants you to go to their conferences and rallies and talk about gun rights, give them your money, your time, and your service, and they negotiate some things in Congress, buy off Masonic politicians who don't want to do anything anyhow, and certainly don't serve Jesus Christ, and they leave you with the so-called right to bear in arms, which you already had before the Constitution existed, because you have it from God. It's a right natural of the law, a right to bear arms. You don't have to defend that right. If someone takes it away from you, take your guns out, you organize a militia, and you take your politician into custody. That's how you reinforce your right. Anyone who claims that that right only exists because it's on paper is already playing a game with you, okay? And that's the Masonic game called juridical legal positivism. So you don't have to defend the right with words, you defend it with bullets, okay? And if you have the guns and they don't, you'll win the fight, okay? And you don't have to say and argue in things. Say, look, if you even try to pass a law against our right, we're marching on Washington, we're going to execute you all and hang you all. That's how you negotiate with scum of that kind. But the Masons don't want you to resort to that, because then you might actually realize that, hey, if we can use it to defend our natural right, maybe we could also use it to restore the Christian order of things. They don't want you to think of that. So when I went to the NRA convention, I was hoping to find some Christians who understood these things. One man donated $100 to the order. That was great. We gave out a lot of leaflets, caps. Everyone said, it's a wonderful thing you're doing. We got absolutely no feedback. They're completely dead persons. They don't live for anyone else, because they've been so habituated to the Masonic order of supporting false causes, false loyalty, false valor, false honor, false patriotism, that they're psychologically drained and have nothing left for Christ and true virtue.
Okay. What is necessary to acquire these qualities of a true Christian leader?
The necessary things is to get down on your knees and become a man of prayer and a man of faith. You have to begin your life alone in solitude with God, with Jesus Christ. And you have to choose to live for him. And you have to do it not because you think you are perfect or superior to everyone else, but because you can realize that without him, you are nothing. And without him, there is no hope for your people. And there is no hope for families, jobs, your nation, security, defense. There's no hope for anything without Jesus Christ. And that the worst thing you can do to anyone is lie to them, deceive them, or distract them from what's really necessary, and that is the service of Jesus Christ. And that you decide to live this way as a man in your entire life, in all the aspects of your life, without shame, without excuses, and without apologies. That's where a man becomes a Christian leader. And that's the only place it begins.
We see the lack of leadership in stopping the full-on Marxist insurrection on the West Coast and 2 cities on the East Coast. How would Christian leadership stop this insurrection quickly? And
Well,
these in charge who support it financially.
okay, so our politicians are doing nothing about it, or relatively nothing. Why? Because they're not leaders. They become politicians because they're vain people and they want everyone to like them, and they're only concerned with what public opinion thinks of them. The whole nation could get conquered by Russia as long as they're high in the polls and win the next election. That's all they care. And you might think that I'm exaggerating, that only an absolute psychopath would be that kind of a person, or someone so filled with self-love, but that's what they are. They are not courageous people. They're absolute cowards. They tremble. They don't know what to do, and they can't make a decision because they only make a decision to get reelected. They're not the kind of people that make a decision to help anyone. That's tough for them because it requires virtue they don't have. So that's why nothing's being done, and that's why in certain states more and less is being done. What would a Christian do? Well, since a Christian lives for Christ, a Christian leader, and he serves Christ, he would react immediately. He'd have a knee-jerk reaction. This must be stopped. He would bring massive force, whether of police or of military, and he'd arrest the whole lot. Then he would, with the FBI, CIA, NSA, he would find all the members of these organizations around the country and he'd put them all in a concentration camp. And he would find the companies that funded them and go after their corporate leaders and put them in the same concentration camp, seizing their personal assets. He'd declare martial law, and he'd rout all these people out. Even if their supporters are in federal courts or in the Supreme Court, he'd arrest them all. Because this is revolution. These are people who want to overthrow the order of law and justice, and these are people who are totally denying the existence of the U.S. Constitution or any rights people have, natural rights to life, liberty, or property. And he wouldn't hesitate in the least, and he wouldn't take any guff. And if anyone in the media attacked him, he'd arrest them too. Mm-hmm. And people would understand it because these people are all enemies of America. You cannot claim that the Constitution gives you rights to overthrow America. I mean, that is, you know, even I think a 4-year-old can understand that. So don't be deceived by the rhetoric, oh, these people have freedom of free rights. This has nothing to do with race. It's all about a Marxist takeover of the country that's been planned since the 30s, 1930s.
There are Catholic presidents in Poland, few of the Baltic countries, then a Calvinist prime minister in Hungary. How is your leadership, and what could be even better?
Well, in these countries, they've shown themselves pretty good leaders because they're opposing the Masonic agenda of the EU as in many ways, not entirely. They still want to be part of the EU, which is a big mistake. They should form a Christian economic bloc in Eastern Europe, and they very easily recruit all the countries, probably from Greece up to Finland, and it would be powerful. And they'd probably recruit the Ukraine too. And but they're trying to woo the West, the money. They don't realize that the financial system West is a complete fraud, money made out of nothing. They can organize their own financial system. They don't have to depend and follow the rules of the Masons or the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers. So it is weak in one sense and strong in another. They are all operating under the modern notion of a leader that they shouldn't be true Christian leaders as leaders of their country. And they need to get the light of grace for that and break out of that mindset. But it takes someone you have to go up to the mountain of faith and look down at the valley of error to realize how wrong everything is down there and how to do it right, because you can see the horizon from the mountain. You can't see it down in the valley of smoke and fog. And that's what they need. We need to pray for Catholics and Christian leaders everywhere, as St. Paul said, that they may be enlightened this way and begin to radically lead their country back to sanity.
Again, more problems, even all this COVID nonsense. There, here, everywhere. It's like, what would Christian leaders do instead of what is being done to handle all this?
First of all, they would have never believed that COVID-19 was a threat to anyone. They would say, what you're asking me to do requires a great amount of proof. If you're asking me to shut down everyone in their houses around the country, you must prove to me that this thing is killing people faster than the Black Death. And until you prove that, I don't care how much you rant and scream. And if he had any counselors in the White House or anywhere, or actually in his government, that said we should act otherwise, he would have them arrested as insane. Okay. And once he found out who financially is behind it and how it's all being orchestrated by Bill Gates and the Bilderbergers and the Rockefellers, he would immediately send military teams around the world and arrest these people and rendition them back to the United States and put them in a concentration camp and try them all and impose capital punishment on them because they're very wicked evilly. Then he would seize all their assets of all their corporations and all their families and all their dynasties. And he would make absolutely illegal under pain of death that anyone take money from these organizations if they're overseas and he couldn't shut them down. And if necessary, he would send military forces to other countries to grab these pieces of scum and uproot this evil network from the whole world. And he wasn't hesitate a moment about it. That's what a Christian leader would do. Because these people want to massacre billions of people for the sake of making money. There has never been a more evil organization. These people are more evil than ISIS, okay? I mean, at least jihadis want to conquer the world for whom they think is the creator. But these people know they're not serving a creator. They're just serving mammon, and maybe even they're serving Satan. Mm-hmm. So they deserve to all be arrested and have capital punishment imposed on them without any mercy. You don't need a trial. It's already a crime so great against the natural law. Their guilt is obvious and manifest. You certainly don't transfer 1.8 billion from the World Health Organization and give it to a Gates organization. That's not what you do. Okay.
Finally, how important today is Christian leadership that the rest of us become leaders?
It is absolutely important for the salvation of the world in a religious sense, but the existence of humanity at the natural sense, because now the world is faced with an international conspiracy of extremely wealthy, powerful, and politically influential persons to exterminate vast portions of the human race. So it's absolutely necessary that Christian men become Christian leaders and go on the crusade to defend the human rights of every human being, especially in matters of medicine, and against this false pandemic and the whole system to control people and plant things into them and wipe out paper money so everything can be controlled by this evil group. This evil group has to be brought down, brought to justice, broken up, and fought in every possible way. And we should give no quarter to them. And we need Christian men to get the balls of some, manliness to them and declare themselves for Christ and become Christian leaders. So we need a real Christian leadership movement. And it's not just, let's talk about what it means to be a Christian man kind of talking heads. I'm talking about action, okay? I'm talking about decisive actions, not people talking on the internet or tweeting out all day. The problem with why we don't have Christian leadership today is we're flooded by the Masonic world order with all manners of things that prevent you from becoming a man. In your youth, you're playing video games, so you never learn to become a man. You learn to become a couch potato. In college, your head is filled with Marxism, and so you never learn what's really going on in the world or has gone on in the world or how you're being hoodwinked. You go to work and you're told exactly to follow everything the company tells you to do about everything, and you're not even allowed to have a second thought. Mm-hmm. In church now, you're forced to pretend there is a virus when there's not, and if you dare sing, you'll be arrested. Mm-hmm. And if you have any spare time, you're acting like a little girly boy, and you all day long on Twitter, social media, Facebook, wasting your time chit-chatting instead of organizing some real group in your community that's going to fight these bleetards. Mm-hmm. And fighting them. Okay, you can see how zealous some people of the left are. Christians had 1/10 of that zeal, we'd be ruling this world. Okay, and we need to take it back for Christ, because it is a sacrilege that non-Christians rule over Christians. That's St. Thomas Aquinas. It is a sacrilege. And who's guilty of that sacrilege? Christians who allow it to take place. Okay, so we need Christian leaders, and invite every man listening to this program to be a Christian leader. And as a woman, you could be a leader too of women, because we have a lot of false women leaders out there too, who are complete shills to the New World Order.
Mm-hmm. And this conversation continues tomorrow.
Who are we going to talk about tomorrow? Jan Sobieski.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Since you're related to his wife, I'll ask the questions and you'll answer them, okay?
Yeah.
Great, great leader. And what was the greatest thing he did in history? Why is his name remembered?
The Siege of Vienna.
Yeah, the Siege of Vienna. I think it still can be found on the internet, an entire version. And so you can put that on the page too, a link to that. So that will be a great program, Jan Sobieski. We'll see, because he was an elected king of Poland.
Mm-hmm.
So he gives good example to all leaders in constitutional monarchies or even in modern democracies. The fact that he was elected didn't keep him from being a Catholic in all things and a true Christian leader.
Yeah. You're going to learn about his grandfather? What a guy. His dad, with 65,000 troops, took on a force of 200 and some and defeated him. I mean, wow.
Yeah, he went to war against Muslims. I think most of his fighting were against Muslims or maybe even the Russians.
Yeah.
So great leader. He knew what, if you wanted peace, you won it by the sword. Because people who know not peace, people who don't know Jesus Christ, who is the King of peace, will never observe peace or law and order unless they're brought into submission by the sword or by the preaching of the gospel. And if they reject one, they merit the other.
Yeah. If you are liking our programs, please keep becoming a monthly subscriber, a one-time subscriber, so we can keep doing better, getting better equipment, better setup for the video. So when you see me slowly moving past that camera, and
Okay.
and we're going to be needing to become independent soon, I fear.
Well, you can see the way we present the truth, we're going to probably be shut down as quick as possible by every platform and by all intelligence agencies, because this is just too true and too pure of stuff we're telling here. Because we're not terrorists, but we are Christians. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thank the people who have made pledges to Ordo Militaris Radio TV. The money doesn't go to AJ. It goes to equipment, okay, that AJ uses. So he doesn't take a salary. I don't take a salary. We're not talking heads to get ourselves rich. We're here to advance the cause, help you get informed, and become a true Christian leader, and live your Christian life better, deeply, and more faithfully. So you can go to Ordo Militaris Radio TV shop. They have a Teespring store. You can buy mugs, cases for your cell phone, T-shirts, hoodies, stickers, or you could come to ordo-militaris.us, our shop page. You go down to flags, you get this flag that's hanging behind me, and half the proceeds will go to the radio station. And if you were listening to our program in the last few days and you bought one of these flags last night, because someone did, and please let AJ know, because then half the proceeds will go to paying off the equipment, okay?
Yeah.
Because we've spent already probably $800 or so on equipment and licensing for Ordo Militaris Radio, and we're keeping accounting of it all, okay? So, because we're trying to make this apostolate self-supporting, and so it won't need grants from Ordo Militaris Inc., which gave the initial seed money for the sake of this apostolate.
Yeah.
So do help us out, and this is one way of, because there's a lot of groups out there that want money from you or asking money from you. But ask yourself, are they really working for true Christian liberty, or are they just pandering the Masonic order and deceiving people by advocating things that won't solve the problem? Okay.
Yeah. And please like our shows on YouTube, BitChute, share them. We're getting more shares and views on BitChute than YouTube, so all right, keep it up. And please subscribe to both channels. And if you want to, you can follow us on Mixcloud. And you can also leave comments on there. we finally got our first one, but it was a liberal, so I deleted it.
And please follow us on Twitter at Militaris CATH. That's a ampersand Militaris CTH. We don't have a Twitter account for Order Militaris Radio TV because they shut you down.
Yeah.
They shut down you quick. They won't allow that blue cross with the radio bolts coming out of it. They won't allow it. They'll just shut AJ down if he uploads that image. That's how Marxist Twitter is. But they're still tolerating our main account and our corporate account. So please follow them on Twitter and retweet their tweets. That helps us tremendously get the word out because no one will sell us time on a radio station or space in their newspapers or advertisements, even on websites. Even some of the best websites that you know of as a Catholic or Christian, they refuse us any advertisement. For example, Breitbart refuses to allow us to put an ad. Okay, yeah. And or Infowars refuses us. So.
So tune in tomorrow for the life of King Jan Sobieski. It's going to be a great program. You're going to learn a lot of stuff because I checked down the autobiography a few years ago, and I have some things ready to go for tomorrow.
Okay, so it's going to be great. And if you're Polish American or have Polish American friends, listen in or let them know about this program, because I think they'll learn a lot more about what the greatness of Poland was than they might be hearing from other sources.
And one thing that does not mention is why he wasn't, brought up for canonization, because he was a faithful Catholic all the way through, defender of Christendom.
I'll ask you that tomorrow. Let's not let everything out of the bag. I'll ask you that tomorrow, and people can find out if they want to know why.
Yeah. This is Order Militaris Radio TV signing off. Deus Volt.
Deus Volt.